All right, today we are diving deep into a really provocative, really complex idea. What if a paternity test was just a standard, mandatory procedure for every single child at birth? We're going to explore how a single policy like that could completely reshape our ideas about family, privacy, and the law itself. I mean, seriously, just think about that for a second. What if, as a matter of course, no different than any other newborn screening, we confirmed the paternity of every child with a DNA test? It's a massive question with some pretty huge implications, and that is exactly what we're going to unpack today. Now, the foundation for this whole explainer is the really thorough research and analysis that was prepared for Dr. Rony Rodas. And what makes his perspective so fascinating is his background. He's not just a technologist, he also holds a master's degree in criminal justice, which is a social science. So that combination gives him this really unique lens to look at a policy that could totally redefine family law as we know it. Okay, so before we get into the what if, let's talk about how things work right now. How do we even determine fatherhood today? Well, honestly, it's kind of a patchwork system. A lot of the time, it's just assumed if the parents are married. Or maybe it's a voluntary form that gets signed at the hospital. Court-ordered tests, those usually only happen when there's already a big dispute. And you know, when that system gets it wrong, the fallout is huge. We're not talking about small mistakes here. This is child support being sent to the wrong person. Family courts getting absolutely swamped with cases, kids walking around with incorrect medical histories, and maybe worst of all, it can delay or even damage that crucial bond between a parent and a child. Okay, but to even start talking about a policy this big, we have to ground ourselves in reality. We have to look at the data. There's so much sensationalism out there around this topic, so separating the facts from the fiction is absolutely critical. And this is where things get really interesting. You've probably seen those daytime talk shows, right? Or the ads from paternity testing labs. They might make you think that something like 10, 20, even 30% of dads out there aren't the biological father. But the actual scientific research, well, epidemiological reviews put that number for the general population way, way lower, somewhere between 1 and 4%. So let's just boil it down to this one number. A realistic research-based estimate is sitting at around 2%. That is a world away from the dramatic figures you hear on TV. And that's the number we really should be using when we talk about making policy. So you're probably asking, why the huge gap? Well, it all comes down to something called selection bias. Think about it. The only people sending samples to a paternity lab are the ones who already have a serious doubt or are in the middle of a conflict. Their results just aren't representative of everybody else. It's a skewed sample. All right, so now that we have a more realistic number to work with, let's look at the other side of the coin. What's the actual case for doing this? What are the potential upsides that the research points to? And the arguments for it, laid out in the research, are pretty powerful. From the child's perspective, it's about their right to a correct medical history and a clear sense of identity right from the start. For men, it's about preventing wrongful financial burdens and getting a clear, quick resolution. For the legal system, it can mean less litigation, which saves time and money. And finally, there's the argument for equity, making sure the same rules apply to everyone, rich or poor. But, and this is a huge but, it's not that simple, is it? You can't talk about creating a universal DNA database without talking about the elephant in the room, privacy. How do you possibly balance the search for accuracy with our fundamental rights? The good news is the research doesn't shy away from this. It tackles the risks head on. The number one risk, obviously, is mass surveillance and the invasion of privacy. The proposed solution? Incredibly strict rules. Things like deleting the raw data right away and putting heavy limits on how the result can even be used. Then you have the constitutional challenges, which would need to be handled by making sure the policy lines up perfectly with due process and our existing laws. Okay, so we've talked about the why and the why not, but how could something like this, actually work in the real world? A proposal this controversial is only going to be as good as its safeguards. So let's look at the blueprint. It really comes down to two different ways of thinking about consent. You could have an opt-out model where testing is the default for everyone. That would give you the most accurate data for the whole population. Or you could have an opt-in model where it's simply an offered choice. That would put individual freedom first. It's a classic trade-off between the collective good and individual autonomy. Look, for a system like this to have any chance of being accepted, the safeguards would have to be, well, basically ironclad. Non-negotiable, the proposal makes it clear, the raw DNA data gets destroyed, it can't be sold or used for other research, law enforcement would need a very strict warrant to get access, and this database would be completely firewalled off from everything else. Public trust would depend entirely on these rules being followed to the letter. So when you boil it all down, what are we really talking about here? It's more than just a new medical test. It's a fundamental conflict. It's a moment that forces us to stop and really think about what we value most as a society. And this quote from the source material just hits the nail on the head. It says that this kind of testing invites a recalibration of values, and it's talking about our most core concepts, our identity, our privacy, and what is truly in the best interest of a child. And that brings us right back to the central dilemma, the big, thorny question we have to ask ourselves. As a society, should we prioritize knowing the biological truth from day one, even if it means accepting the risks of collecting that data from every single newborn? There is no easy answer to that. So all of the incredible, in-depth research and the data analysis we've walked through in this explainer, that was all prepared for Dr. Rony Rodas. If this has sparked your curiosity and you want to go even deeper into this subject and learn more about his work, you've got to visit PhDadvisement.com. Thanks for watching.